Hello, can you hear me? Hi, can you hear me? Hello. Yes. All right. Welcome. Let's see. Chat. Yes. All right. Welcome, everybody. All right. So, welcome. So we were going to go over the kind of review the midterm, just to have an idea of what to expect. I was going to go over several types of questions, categories, things you can expect it to be on the exam, and also just view a few sample questions, and then just open it up for everybody. If you have any doubts, any particular question you want to go over, maybe a quiz, question on a quiz we want to go over, we can then answer those for everybody. And then Wednesday, I'm going to make the exam available starting at 8 o'clock. And you're welcome to stay and take the exam that day with me, although it'll stay open for several days. So you can take it later if you prefer. But if you want to take it while I'm in the room, while we're all together, and you have any questions during the exam, I can answer them right there and then. Although again, it'll stay open. Obviously, I won't record the exam or whatnot, but ideally we could all come on Wednesday and take it together. But obviously, not everybody's going to be able to be there. But yeah, you're welcome to do that. Or if you prefer to take it later the week, then that's fine. It'll be available for several days, probably till Saturday evening or something. Let's see the question. Okay. Can we go over the React quiz? Sure, you can do that. Yeah, we could do that first. Go over a particular quiz. Let's do that, and then I just want to remind myself that there is an exam review document. So I'm just going to open it here so that I'll leave it open, and we'll come back to that a little later. Let's see. Redux was really hard to follow. Can we focus there in review, please? Sure. Although the exam is not going to be heavily geared towards Redux. There'll be maybe one question, like a really simple question. But yeah, no, we definitely can go over that. Okay, so let's take a look at the quiz, the React quiz. Okay, so let's see quizzes. And the React quiz was 4. This one. Oh, okay. So this one had puzzles, right? And so the question was, consider the following code snippet, right? And so this says, It says export default EWQ, right? And so that kind of gives you a clue of what you might want to put there. Also, looks like they were being passed 2 parameters. One of them is ASD, which is being used right here, and plus SDF. So here's a clue that probably this is SDF, right? Because otherwise it would be undefined, right? So nowhere else do we have the declaration of SDF. So it must be SDF, right? And then this is the summation, although it could be concatenation, right? These could be strings. We don't know. Although, do we know? Let's see. But it looks like we are calling it this way, right? We're calling with 2 values, 23 and something. So we know that SDF. So here's another clue that this SDF is right here, right? This is SDF. Right? So this is declaration. This must be SDF. Also, the parameter is SDF. So what's this 5? So this 5 must be ASD, right? This must be ASD. So ASD is 23. And we are going to pass SDF and CXZ. Let's see, we're displaying ASD, we're displaying that, we're displaying the summation, presumably. Although, again, it could be concatenation if we are passing strings, right? Although we do give you a clue that we want this to render 57, right? So we want this to render 57. That means that this has to be the summation of 57. We've already given you 23, so it must be, whatever the summation of 57 minus what? Yeah, 23, right? So that's what 6 is, right? It's 57 minus 23. And so this has to be 57, right? This must be 57. So this, which is the summation of this, was really the variable CVB. So CVB goes here. That's CVB. One thing that I did say in the quiz is that you could not put the value of 3 as 57, right? You could not do that. So the right answer would be CVB. Yeah, so 1 is EWQ, 2 is SDF, 3 is CVB. Here we are loading CXZ, which is, this is the file that contains this CXZ. So we're importing that, and whatever that exports, EWQ, is being assigned to DSA. So DSA contains whatever that returns, which is its function. So DSA is that function. So we call it DSA with ASD is equal to 23 and equal to whatever that is, 57 minus 23. So that was the does that make sense? Let's see what I'm saying. Wouldn't we have to put CXZ? Which one? Since CVB will combine this one, CVB. Well, no, we're passing integers, right? We're both passing integers. For this one's 23, and here we're passing whatever 57 minus 23 is. So they're both integers. So these are integers. So this is arithmetic addition. Why is 3 CVB instead of CXZ? Oh, yeah, no, you're right. Yes, you're correct. That could also be CXB. Correct. I'm sorry, you're right. Absolutely. Yes, definitely this is CXB. Yeah, this was to confuse you, and I was confused. Yes, absolutely. 3 is CXB. Correct. That's correct. Yeah, no, CVB is just a string being displayed on the screen. Yeah, CVB, ZXC, all these are just strings displayed on the screen. They're not variables, right? These are not variables. These are just being displayed on the screen. Yeah, it was meant to confuse you, and I got confused. Why is the import DSA instead of import EWQ? DSA. So DSA just gets whatever that exports, right? So CXZ is exporting that, right? So DSA is getting the value of whatever EWQ is, right? So it's just a reference, right? These don't have to match. This has to match that, right? But this doesn't have to match with that, and this doesn't have to match with the name of the file. Yeah, no, they don't have to match. It's just an assignment, right? So it's just like this variable, right? It's being assigned whatever that's on the right hand side. And so same thing here. So whatever that exports is whatever this imports. So it's an assignment. Does quiz grading of 10% consider top end quizzes or all? Yeah, I usually like drop one of the quizzes, like the lowest quiz. So this one, consider the following code snippet. So it's REW. So it's passing. We're passing a parameter EWQ. Sorry, ZXZ, right? And then we are given this array that we've assigned it to EWQ. And then we filter that array as we iterate over each one, and we're only going to keep the values from the array that are greater than whatever the argument says, right? So this says, iterate over that array and render line items with the values of that array of having filtered. So there'll be some subset of this array, right, having filtered. And so we're passing 42. So that means that this is going to render a line item where we only get the array of the values that are greater than 42, right? So the ones that would be 78, 56, 45, and 67, right? So the question is, well, which one does it render? So I believe it would be this one, right? All these are greater than 42. This one contains 23, which is less than 42. This one is 12, no good. This one has 23 and 34, so it would be this one, right? This is the only one that has all the values greater than 42, right? And I think, let's see, this one was consider the following code. So you have 3 elements. So this one just renders a constant YTR, and this renders a constant UYT. So this one says, okay, well, and okay, so track. So we have these 3, right? Where this one says, read the location, right, in the path, grab the path name, and just split it. So we did this in class, right? We did this in class to highlight the left-hand side navigation. Right, so EWQ contains all the elements in the path. And then so whatever length of that path is, we're grabbing the last 2 elements, right, in that array, and we're parsing it into QQ and EE. Right, so the last 2 elements in the path, we're converting them into integers, right, and then so this must be an arithmetic addition. And so the question was, okay, so we know that this grabs the path elements and the last 2 integers are added together. That's what it renders H2, right? These 2 just render just hard-coded stuff. Yeah. So the question is, okay, well, assuming that you have these routes, right, and this, so you have these 3 routes here, right? If the path matches this, then we're rendering tray. If it's the root, right, then by default we're just rendering YTR. And if it renders GFG 3243, then we're rendering UYT. Okay. And then this is a nested path. So you have a top level path that provides 4 links, right? And then you have a top level route. So yeah, we did this in class when we had like the labs and Twitter, where we have a top level route, right, in the app.js, I think. And then which then would load the labs, right? We have lab/star, right? Which is this example here. This is the same thing as labs/star that you did for the assignment. And then it would then, whatever followed the remainder of the path was handled by CXZ. And CXZ then looked at whatever was the remainder. So for instance, these two, right? So this one, this, and these two are handled by this one, right? So these three, POI, IUT, and UYT, are handled by ZXZ, whereas DSK and FDS renders YTR, right? So the question was, okay, what happens if you click on POI? So this one, right? So if you click on POI, then you have this EWQ. So it's handled by this one, right? CXZ. So CXZ then does an additional match of whatever follows, right? It checks whatever follows. And what follows nothing. Right, so it doesn't match this one, it doesn't match that one, so it matches this one, right, the path. So it renders YTR. So YTR renders YTR. So the answer here is YTR, right? That's YTR. If you click on OIE or OIEU, right, this one is handled by this one, which also renders YTR. Right, so this would be YTR. Both of these are YTR. If I click on EWQ 4754. So these two are handled by that one, but let's check this one now. So if we click on that, it gets handled by ZXZ. So which matches this, right? 4354. So it's handled by Trey. So Trey is gonna take those last two and add them together. So this renders whatever the summation of that is. So 43 plus 54. Okay. And this one is also handled by that by CXZ, but it matches this one over here. Matches this one over here, which is UYT, and UYT just renders UYT. Right, so this was YTR, the addition of 43 plus 57, whatever that is, and this was UYT. Yeah. Yeah. So those were the that was the exam. I don't know that there will be anything like this hard in the midterm. Now that I think about it, I might need to add something as interesting as this. But I don't think the midterm has anything this complex. Maybe, I don't think so. Anyway, any questions on that? All right, so I'm gonna go over the midterm. So already, there'll be a like a really simple Redux question, where you'll probably just read like a read-only value where a reducer has some values that the client, that the some component needs to read the data, right, and then do something with that data. Okay, so there won't be like any dispatch going from the like click here and so the reducer gets called and whatnot. So you'll need to understand how we read from the reducer, right? But we're not going to change the state of the reducer, right? There's going to be a quiz on that when we come back, since you're currently just only not working on that assignment. So I'm not gonna go have a complex question on Redux. It'll be like read only. There will be questions on use state as being able to read state, set the state, change the state, on click, things like that. As like maybe like a tiny little calculator. That would be a good practice for you to do on your own when you build a tiny little calculator. Right, that I can click this, I click that, right? I can do some addition and subtraction, right? And I can update the state of a result based on maybe two inputs like A, B. You have two inputs A, state variable A, state variable B, and I have a couple of buttons that one does an addition and one does a subtraction, right? And I update some results of A plus B. So I would practice something like that, real easy. I would practice maybe the tiny little example we did on like the to-do list, being able to add an element to an array, remove an element from an array, be able to splice something out, or push something from an array. So I would practice that, creating a small little to-do, and that you could create that from scratch. Just practice that. I mean, the assignment already asks you to practice that, right? But I would make sure I understand that those exercises inside and out. Okay, so you can expect similar puzzles such as this, right? Where also these are all randomly generated. All these questions are randomly generated. That's why you'll find a lot of these. YTR, TRE, and that's I need to do that because since these are remote exams, I need to guarantee some level of that everybody's getting a different exam. I mean, it's the same types of questions, right, with same level of difficulty, right? But I'm trying to make it hard for someone to just copy and see, hey, what'd you get on question number 3? So question number 3 from you will not be the same question number 3 from someone else, and the variables will be all jumbled up, and sometimes it'll be addition, sometimes it'll be subtraction, multiplication, division, right? So I'm creating random questions so that so again, to make sure that to minimize. I mean, obviously, there's no way to guarantee that people are not going to copy and whatnot, right? But I do want to, minimize the those opportunities. So yeah, so the questions will be somewhat random like this. That and small little puzzles, right? What happens when I click here? What happens when I click there? And you have to like think through it. All right. Okay. All right, so yeah, I put together this midterm review. There's going to be a lot of it. I would say maybe half of it is going to be HTML, CSS questions. Okay, and about input fields. Make sure you know all the input fields attributes, right? Whether when to use placeholder, when to use value, title, name, ID. Make sure that you know what each one of those does, right? So okay, so let's go over this together. This midterm review. So some best practice. So here's I often, or sometimes, I ask some best practice questions, and I might give you some data, and then I ask you, well, what's the best way to display this? So that it looks like this. Should I use divs? Should I use tables? What should I use, right? And let's see, is A7 do this? So that, no, I believe it's due next Sunday. I believe it's is it? My intention was for you to get an additional week. Oh, this Sunday. Okay. Yeah, no, actually, no. Let's push that another week. I meant for you to have this week free so you can focus on the midterm, and the due date for the assignment would be the following week. That was my intention. I'm sorry. I'll update it. So that you get an additional week, especially because it's Redux, and Redux is has a it has a steep learning curve, right? And so you need to really pay attention what you're doing. Okay, so yeah, so let's push this. Let's move that a week later, so you can focus on the midterm this week. Okay. All right, so let's continue here. Yeah, so remember that the best practice for displaying tabular data is to use tables. I mean, that was the initial intent of using tables. So a trick question might be, hey, I got these columns, right? And I'm writing an article, and I want the article to break it up into multiple columns. And hey, I'm using tables, right, to break it up, right? So I can break them up horizontally, right? So that's a bad use of tables. Right? Tables are meant for tabular data, right? Not to split up a page and establish some kind of layout, right? Nevertheless, people still use it for that purpose, right? But that is a bad practice, right? You should not use tables. That table should be used for tabular data. We should instead use CSS, right? And we've seen there's a few ways, right, of doing it. You can use Flex, right? You can use CSS grids. Bootstrap has an entire library dedicated how to lay out stuff in columns, right? So we should not be using tables. So if you see a trick question on the exam about laying out stuff and tables and whatnot, just be aware, right, that what is the best practice there. A couple of questions you will find about radio buttons and checkboxes. We briefly went over this at the beginning of the term when we started looking at HTML and forms. We looked at input fields, drop downs, a whole bunch of those, right? And I had you practice a few of those in those labs. And so here's just asking, do you know how they work? Do you make things mutually exclusive? And by mutual exclusion means that one or the other can be selected, but not both at the same time. Right? Now, radio buttons by default, on their own, right? If you declare a whole bunch of radio buttons, they would not be mutually exclusive, right? Meaning that you can select all of them, right? Irrespective of who's selected or not selected, right? To turn on the fact that two particular radio buttons are mutually exclusive, you do that by making the names of both radio buttons the same name, right? So, for instance, if you want to ask the question, are you tenured? Yes, no. And there would be two radio buttons, meaning that you can't be both yes and both no, right? It has to be one or the other. So if they both have the same name here, then that means that now these belong to a group, right? These belong to the same group, the tenure group. Okay. Now you can use another set of radio buttons to ask another question, right? Are you married? And those are mutually exclusive, right, between themselves. So this and this, these two radio buttons are mutually exclusive. amongst themselves, but they're not mutually exclusive with the other group, right? It doesn't. So they're independent of each other, right? So this is one group, and this is another group, right? This is the married group, right? And this is the tenured group. Okay, make sense? So yeah, so you use names. So the typical question in the exam might be, I'll give you, I'll say, oh, you use IDs to make them unique. I mean, to make them mutually exclusive, which makes no sense, right? Because you can't have two elements with the same ID. You can't make ID equal the same value. So that's obviously wrong. Yeah, I might throw out all the stuff which is wrong. Which usually my questions that have multiple choice, they'll have maybe like 4 choices, of which 2 of them are obviously wrong, right? That you can immediately just discard, right? By very, very quick inspection. And then I'll then give you another 2 choices that you kind of have to scratch your head and say, oh, what's the difference between these 2? And then but they're obviously, one of them is obviously wrong. Okay, well, maybe not as obvious. So yeah, so radial buttons are meant to be mutually exclusive, but not checkboxes. So checkboxes are meant to be mutually inclusive, right? Where you can also create groups, right? So for instance, this is the genre group, and you can create another group called the color group. Again, using names, right? So so these 3 are associated with one another, and these 3 are associated with each other. Now the behavior, it doesn't change the behavior of the checkbox, right? Whether you can select it or not, or it doesn't affect the behavior of other checkboxes. It just allows you to group them together so that if you submit data to the server of the genre group, then all values that you select will be sent over. And notice that these have value attributes. See that? So the value that is grouped together as an array. So name, the genre variable would be equal to an array of all the selected values of horror and drama and sci-fi that you select. But it would not include values from the color group, right? Because they are separate groups. Okay. Also here, I should point out that you can initialize by saying checked. Checked means that the default, this is originally defaulted to checked, meaning it's already selected. Okay, same thing here. You can, by default, you can say checked and say that these 2 values are initially checked. Okay, so the value, right, is if you check it, then that value is added to the array of values. If it's not checked, then that particular value is not part of the resulting array of values. Okay. Now this one, yeah, we have no value. Okay. All right. Also, make sure you understand all the other attributes, right? Value, you have an input field, which is the default value, right? You give it an initial value for an input field, and it would display that input field. IDs for, so it's like, IDs, unique identifier. So, one value for whole document, right? And value is the initial value. Initial value of an input field of any field. Okay. Placeholder. If you remember, placeholder is the grayed out. Is a grayed out hint of what we want user to type. Right. So, for instance, we would if we're expecting an email, then we would put here like an example of an email, like alice@wonderland.com or john@abc.com, right? So we're giving an example of what we're expecting, and it only appears when there's nothing typed in the input field. Once you start typing something, that placeholder disappears. It's kind of grayed out just to give you a hint. Okay. And then if you backtrack and you delete everything, then the placeholder comes back. Title, it's also another way of giving the user a kind of like a hint of what that field is all about. Like if you hover over the tooltip that shows when you hover over field. Okay, so if you hover your mouse on top of the field, then whatever you have in the title, but it'll show up like a small little grayed out hint of what is that we want you to type in there. So definitely there'll be questions on that. Definitely on the check boxes, the radio buttons. Make sure you know how those work. Another question that you probably will get is about date formats, right? So you can give it if the input field is of type date, you can provide a default value, and that value needs to be a particular format, right? The format is that starts with a 4-digit year dash, then 2-digit month, and then dash 2-digit day, right? So year, month, and day, not slashes. Okay, and in the order year, month, and day, right? 4, 2, and 2. Okay, so make sure you remember that. I'm pretty sure there's a question on that. All right, so dropdowns can be implemented using select, right? And then giving several options, for you to choose from. And the values inside of the option, right? The text inside of the option, that's what the user actually sees in the dropdown. Okay. Now, if you select that particular option, the value is whatever you provide here, right? And the intent is that this is for humans to read, but the value is meant for JavaScript or the server. These are friendly to the server. Maybe these are constants or strings, right? In some array that have a map into some database and whatnot, right? Whereas these strings are human readable, right? They're meant for humans to be able to read it. And here you can put lots of data, lots of text, giving instructions on the user on how to select this, or maybe some hints on the numeric value of the month, right? And you can by default the option that is currently selected actually in 2 different ways. One is by providing a selected flag or attribute in the option. Another way is that you can provide the value of the select whose value is equal to the value of the option. Right, so if this is equal to value FPB, right? If it matches the value of a particular option, then that option is selected. Okay, so 2 different ways of doing it. Focus is also another example that we went over in class, right? You have an input field, right? You can give a label to the input field, right? So that if you click on the label, then the input field gets focused. But what we mean by focus is that the cursor appears in the input field, and then I can type in that input field, right? And that you can achieve by making the label for tag, right, attribute equal to the value of the ID. Right? If those match, then clicking on the label will cause the input field to to have focus. Now, for checkboxes and radio buttons too, right? It can be done a different way. You can also do it this way, right? Using the IDs and whatnot. But it can also be achieved by wrapping the label, right? The whole label attribute, wrapping it around, right? The input field, right? You can achieve the same behavior, right? You can select if you click on the username, then the checkbox gets checked. Okay. Right, so that was something about HTML. Let's talk about CSS. Yeah, so make sure you understand float, right? Float left, float right, so that things are going to justify left or justify right. We use that for the grids, right, where we implemented one row and then multiple columns that were floated all to the left, right, to fill in that row, right? So play around with float. This float left, float right, this clear both, right? Also, make sure you're familiar with the margins, the difference between margins, paddings, borders, width, height, position, where to put it, whether the position is absolute, static, relative. And so I might give you a little puzzle there, right, where I position, something on the screen, and I tell you how far it is from the top, how far it is from the bottom, right, and then you have to figure it out. Okay. Then okay, so some practice, right, of that there we talk about some best practices or bad practices of using either the style attribute versus the style tag versus the link, right? We said that the link was the better choice, right? It was the best practice. That style was absolutely the worst option. Although, right, for academic purposes, I might use it in the questions, right, in the examples, in the lab and whatnot. But in production, right, if you're doing software engineering, you would not use the style attribute. We talked about style element being slightly better, right? The one that you declare in the header, right, in the head of the HTML document. That's slightly better, right? But absolutely the best practice is to just declare the CSS outside of the link, right? And the reasons that we gave, right, were that style attribute has the most relevance to the actual style of the element, right? If I say that this is red, but then in the style sheet I say that it's blue, right? The style attribute will win, right? Because the closer you are and the more specific you are about the element, then the more relevant your style is. One wins over other styles, right? And the farther you're out, the less relevant you are. Okay, so that's that. Just keep that in mind. There might be, right there. I think there is actually an example where I have an input. I have a little box, and then there's 3 different places where I tell it to be yellow, blue, green, right? And one of them is using an ID, the other one's using a class, right? The other one is kind of declaring the link. The other one's declare on the style attribute. One of them is to declare in the style tag, right? And so then I ask you, well, at the end, what color is this going to be? Is it going to be red, yellow, green? What is it going to be? Right? And it depends on where it's declared, right? If it's declared right on the style, on the style attribute, that was going to win over things that are declared on the style tag, right? And whatever you declare on the style tag is going to win over whatever you declare on the link. Okay, so there's an order in which things are declared. That's why in the assignment, I had you declare the Bootstrap style sheet right at the beginning of the document, and then I would say, okay, well, after that you can load your own index.css right after that, because you can override the the previous CSS style sheet because in the order of operation. Okay, so yeah, make sure you play around with that a little bit. Just review that. All right, so no bootstrap, right? Meaning I'm not going to ask you to remember a particular class, a list dash group or nav dash pills or anything like that. So there's no need to memorize any of that. Obviously, you do need to memorize some of the CSS attributes and properties, right? Of background color, margin, padding, things like that. Also, the derivative of those, right? Margin left, margin right, padding top, padding bottom, things like that. No border radius, not border. We're not gonna go over that. So no fonts. Order of priority. So yeah, so I already mentioned this, right? That there would be a question about the order of declaration of CSS rules, right? That later rules override previous rules. No REST because we haven't seen it at all. No UML, no JPA. So React. Yeah, I'm not going to ask you about root in the index or the React DOM. I'm not going to ask you that. Function components. Make sure that you know how to use useState, where I can give you an initial value and then the actual value and the state variable. I'm sorry, the function that sets it. And I might not use variables that are easily to read, right? As state variable or email and then set email. Okay, absolutely not. What you'll instead will probably get is something like this, where you get some bogus name, right, and then another bogus name, and so that's the name of the variable, and then that's the function. That's the function that sets the value of the variable, right? So I can call WER. I can say WER. I can say true, right? And then sets the value of QWE, sets it to true. Okay. Yeah. Oh, wait. Oh, I have it here. I have it here. I got the example. Yeah. So you definitely should expect something like that, right? And then what you probably so one example that I would play around with definitely is a couple buttons and then a couple of variables, maybe two Boolean variables that controlled by a couple buttons, and then as you click a button, then something appears. If you click another button, then it disappears. We played around with that in class when we were hiding and showing the email input field. We were like toggling the label, and then the input field would toggle back and forth. Buttons, we did it with buttons, right? So definitely we play around with that. So you could expect something like that, obviously in a reduced format, and where what happens if you click on this and then something appears? Or then okay, well, what happens if you click on that and it disappears, right? So and then I'll say, well, what does H2 render? As you play around with these input fields. So make sure you understand that part. You did in class. Go over that example. Maybe do one on your own from scratch, and make sure that you understand that. Definitely some player with some just toying around with arrays, where you are doing all those functions that you went over when you did JavaScript labs, right? You did map, filter, find index. What else did you do? Map. Okay. Yeah, so make sure those you understand all those functions correctly, right? And make sure that you know that you can string them together, right? You say dot filter, right? That the output of one function can be the input of another function. They they all create an array, right? They can all produce an array, and that array can then be passed alongside with other functions, right? So it's an array that gets calculated by another array, and so on and so forth, right? You can string them together, yeah, and they all take a function, right? Some of them take one argument, some of them take two arguments. Actually, no, they all take at least two arguments, right? Where one is the elements, and the other one is the index, right? They'll like that. So this is, here's your elements, and here's the index, right? Index. And so make sure that to play around with that. Let's see what else. So here's return. Oh yeah, here's an example where the output of one filter, right, is the input of another map. You can have multiple filters. I might, give you a a trick question where I do first a map and then a filter, which is not the same thing, right? Filter removes some elements from the array, whereas map, right, it's the same. You get the same number of elements in the original array, and then filter just filters out some of those, right? So depending in which order you make them, you get different outputs, right? So careful there. Conditional rendering, probably this would be a combination with the state variables that you're toggling things on and off, right? Where you have the value of some Boolean value that you can then and with other elements to be able to either show or hide that particular element that follows along, right? And whether this is true or false, and then that displays or not. So probably a question of like this, but mapped with logged in, right? But instead of hard coding it, it'll be something like use state, right? And then this is maybe a state variable set logged in, that where there'll be a couple buttons that set the value of logged in, right? So something like a button here called login. Ooh, I like this question. And this if you on click would call set logged in true, right? So and then maybe another button that says log out. Ooh, I like this question. False, right? And so now you would have here, if you click on log in, then it would say welcome, right? And if you click on log out, it would say go. Okay. Or this might say please log in. That's more polite. And then you can have maybe another state variable that says username and set username that says who's logged in. This is Alice, and this says welcome username. Welcome Alice, right? So yeah, I'm thinking about like a question like that, maybe a small little tiny little login screen that as you log in, it says, "Oh, welcome, blah, blah, blah," right? And thank you, Reservoir. Sounds good. Thank you. Canvas to this Sunday. Sounds good. Thank you. What's the deadline? So I'm thinking of making it available on Wednesday. starting at 8. And you're welcome to come to class and you can take the exam there. That's not going to be a recorded session, right? So if you come, you take the exam, but it will not be recorded. So that obviously people ask questions. I don't want to show the answers or anything like that. And it'll be available, I would say maybe till Saturday evening or something. So it'll be available for a couple of days. So it'll be available Wednesday starting at 8, and then available Thursday, Friday, and then Saturday evening, something like that. Let's see. No. Oh, okay. So I used to cover class components. So no questions on class components. I don't cover them anymore. Right now, I'm focusing only on functional components. That's the more prevalent way. That's where the React is going. Okay, so there might be a question here on syntax, and I've talked about this quite a bit. To be careful when you are handling on clicks. If you pass in a reference to a function, then that's fine. You can have an on click, but be careful to also provide arguments. If you provide arguments using this syntax, you're going to end up in an infinite loop, right? That if you want to call a function that takes parameters, then you need to wrap it inside a function. So a function within a function. Okay. Play around with onChange, right? That can call a function with some value. Certainly route and a no history, but definitely use params. What was the other one? Use location. Actually, did we? Yeah, we did. ES6 export default. No, I don't think we. So no. Export default something below. Yeah, we did export default. Yeah, no, we didn't see this. Export default we did see. Import something. So make sure that you understand imports and exports. Spreader function. Yeah, there'll be definitely at least 2 questions on spreader function. One is spreader applied to arrays, and the other one spreaders applied to objects. Okay. So there's a question in the chat. No questions about JS or jQuery. No questions on jQuery. On JavaScript, yes. JavaScript, absolutely, but not on jQuery. So no jQuery. No jQuery. No questions on jQuery. Definitely abbreviations. Redux, just 1 question. Yeah. So create reducers, pure functions, state and action. Actually, no reducers. Combine reducers. Well, not combine reducers, but configure reducers. Yes. Create namespace, reducer A, create namespaces. Yeah. So this would be not combine, but this configure. No, what is it? Configure store. Sorry, configure store. So no create reducer, but not configure reducer, but configure store. Okay, where you say producers, right? And then you provide the name of the producers. Provide the store, yeah, you do the provider, right? And then create the store, you provide it, yep, definitely. State mapper, no. Dispatcher, no. Connect, no. No dispatcher. But yes, select. So use select. Definitely use select, where you get a state, right? And you then say, you know, what state dot to do. So I would go over that example, right, of how to read values from a reducer. So basically, the only thing you need to know is that there'll be some initialization values, maybe an array or an object, right, that is used to as the initial state, right? That is going to be exported as a reducers, right? Export whatever dot reducer. That's going to be used to configure the store, and then in the use select, you read that data to render it. Okay, so here you close my to-dos, right, and then you use that to-dos to render some array or something like that. Okay, so that's going to be the extent of that one Redux question, right? But you know, definitely a lot of use states, right, that changes the state over time, but that state is not going to be then dispatched to the reducer. Okay, that we'll do later when we come back from the midterm. There'll be maybe a quiz on that, or when we get to the server, right, you'll get to play around with it. The spreader. Yes, the spreader. The spreader. Okay, so let's take a look at the spreader. So the spreader. Yeah, so we played around with will we get access to this document? It is access, right? If you go, you should be able to see it now. If you go home, you should be able to see it in week 7. There's an exam review. Do you not see it? Let me share with you. Copy. If you don't see it, I'll paste it here in the chat. Oh, to everybody. There we go. Does everybody have access to that document? It should be in your. It should be in Canvas. Okay. Yeah. So spreader function. There's 2 uses of the spreader function. One is to copy an old object into a new object, right? And then once you copy the old object, you can then override certain properties that you've copied and declare new ones, right? You know, override some property with new value, and you can add, you know, a new property, right? New value. So you can copy all the properties of the old objects onto this like that, onto this new object, and then you can add, or I'm sorry, override the values that you don't like, right? So here you're overriding, and you can add new properties as well, right? So here's an example where we are copying state, right? And then we are overriding a particular property widget with something in the action.widget. You can also use it from arrays, right? That copy onto a new array copies the old array. So all the elements in the old array get copied. And then you can append new element 1, new element 2, and so on and so forth, right? And now you can append it at the beginning or also at the end, right? You can put it at the end or in the middle. You can add it in the middle. So this is new array 1, 2, and 3. And so you could say, prepend, blah, 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 and then append another one. Append other elements. So you can put the old array at the beginning, at the end, or in the middle of the new array, right? Which is pretty cool. So yeah, so play around with that. Definitely a couple questions on spreaders. Definitely maps, definitely filters. Right? Play around with filters, with map. Okay. Destructor, right? Make sure you play around with destructor, where you have a variable that has, right, like this, right? You have a, let's see. Right. Right. If we want to create an object here that some of the syntax in JavaScript is kind of funky in ES6, where, for instance, if you want to create an object, objects will always have this format where you have the name of the property followed by the name of the value, whether that's a string, a boolean, whatnot. Same thing, name, value. But right, if the name of the property has the same name as a variable that is being assigned that property, then you can abbreviate that with just the name of the property. Okay, so that B there means it's a property called B who is being assigned the value of a variable also called B. So careful, right? What else? So here's a nice little cheat sheet, right? That shows some of the new syntax, right? More relevant syntax in ES6, right? Where you could do arrays. Right? So for instance, you can do you have an array 1, 2, 3, where you can extract elements, right? So A will be now 1, right, and B will be 3, right? Or you can do a swap. This allows you to swap the values of A and B, whereas the old way you would have to do assign A to some temporary variable, then B to A, and then temp to B. Right now, right, you can be much more elegant, right? Where B gets A and A gets B, right? So that's pretty cool. You're not going to get anything like that, right? So that's a little too clever, right? But just so you know, you can take a look at some of the new syntax. Also, like for instance, if this returns an object, right? If this returns an object, then this is extracting the property in that object called op and then assigning it to a local variable op. Whereas in the old syntax, right, you assign it to some local variable and then temp dot, you use dot notation to extract each one of the elements to a local variable. So notice that the syntax is so much more terse, right? It's much more compact. So yeah, I'll just look at just a few of these. Nothing this complex, right? We've done this, right? We've done this with deconstructors, right? So we're playing around with this in class, right? Well, okay. Let's take a look at old exams from previous semesters. See if we can find something here. Spring 2023. Well, that's next year. When one, let's see what we got there. Okay, look at that. So here's a midterm. Let's see what we got here. All right. So for instance, yeah, look at this. So here's a little component C, right? That has use state variable of I and j. Notice that I gets false, where j is going to be the setter function, right? That you can set false or true. So here's a couple of buttons or spans that if you click on K, then it sets it to false, and if you click on L, then it sets to true, right? So they would toggle each other. If you click on one, it appears, and then you click on the other one, it disappears. Right? Here's a couple of radio buttons that we want them to make them mutually exclusive, right? So how do you do that? With the ID, you can use the name, use the value. Yeah, what do you use, right? All right, so these are using classes. I don't cover classes anymore. I use functions. So here's a little reducer. So this is using the old reducer syntax. It has changed since then. So this is no longer valid. We don't use connect anymore. And these are the reducers here. So yeah, this syntax is very, very old. So yeah, no, we don't. Here's an example of an array. So here's the array CB. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 elements. HQ contains 4 elements. And then XE is copying over all the elements of CB. So XE now contains what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's 5 elements there. 6, 7, 8, and then HQ, which makes it 9 elements. So the question is, how many elements does XE have? Well, it has 5 integers plus 6, 7, 8 integers plus an array in there, which is 1 element. Right, this whole thing is just 1 element. So in total, there's 9 elements or whatever. So yeah, none of these elements are necessarily in here. I mean, yes, we have a reference to that array, but they're not. We didn't copy them over, right? They're still in the HQ, but they're not in there. So careful there. Here's a cute one. So here's an object GU, right, that contains attributes SI with DA and CF with QE, right? And then we have UJ that contains also CF, contains CO, and look at this, right? We're grabbing GU and we're copying at the bottom of it. See that? So that's a problem because GU also declares a field called CF. See that? So in the end, which CF do you get? Do you get this CF here is equal to do? Or you get the CF here that is copied at the bottom? So the one that gets copied at the bottom overrides the ones that declare above, right? So then you grab that whole UJ, right, and you copy it at the beginning of GU. So all of these get copied over. So not this CF, right? It's CO, than SI and CF, right? So as if you grab these two, right, and you put them right here, and you stretch that out. You stretch that out. So you only have CO, SI, and CF, or in UF, right? So you get all those. But then GU kind of overrides CF. So you kind of overriding this one over here, and it's overriding the CO. Right? It's overriding the CO. So basically you end up with just this CF and the CO. Plus 1. So you're not getting the CF because you're getting this one. You're not getting the CO because you're getting this one. The only thing that survives from this UJ is this SI. Right, so this is the same thing as saying SI colon DA, and that's it. Right? So the question was, okay, so what is GUSI? It's DA. What is UJCF? It's just WH. And what is GUCO? It's ND. Okay. Yeah. So it's asking you those kinds of questions. Class components, no class components. All right. So here we have. Consider the following code snippets. We have so we have answer having these, rendering MJ, NP, LIU, NW, NWR, which is passing LE, OE, 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 OE. They all take the same arguments. Okay. And then it says, well, which of the following implementations for all these 4 displays OE? Wait, which of the following implementations for all these displays OE? Okay. Select all that apply. All right. Well, how about this? How about NP? Does this render OE? Well, let's see. It says NP takes as argument a property called LE. Well, yeah. And then it renders OE. Yeah, it does. That works. All right, class. We didn't cover class, so never mind class. This one says LE, so it's IU taking some property LE. Yeah, this was a trick question, and it doesn't count for us here because we haven't seen this props. That's an old syntax using class components, which we don't cover class components, so that doesn't work. There's a class component too. Yeah, so yeah, no, this question does not work for you because we haven't covered class components. But nevertheless, I could give you multiple different implementations, right, of that, and ask you what, which ones render so and so out. This one says, which of the following? Okay, now this uses classes. Never mind. Consider the following array. All right, so I give you an array. It says, which of the following code snippets renders the following output? All right, so that's the output, using UL. Okay, so this is checking your knowledge of the syntax that we have been using for the last couple of months. I guess almost a month. Right, you have UL. You're iterating over EWQ and map. Right, here's the argument, and this is returning LI. See that? Okay, so that definitely looks like it works. But how about this one? Okay, so this doesn't work. Right? The reason that doesn't work is that you have this return here. And to have this return here, the only way that can work is that you have curly brackets, curly, open curly brackets, close curly brackets. So this is syntactically incorrect. How about this one? So REW, just renders LI and closing on. So that looks right. That looks correct. How about this one? So here we have a function, which the map could take a function, but then it changes over to the arrow syntax, right? That's not right. Okay, so the answer was these two. These two are the selected answer. All right, so this is okay. So here's another question. Consider the following array. So I'm giving you this array. And it says, okay, which of the following renders 107, 65, and 95? Let's see. So notice that they all have this map something 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 greater than 50. See that? They all have the same predicate. See that? They all have this comparing it to 50. See that? So there's something about 50 being greater than 50. So the clue to this is that I'm going to render only the elements that are greater than 50. And notice that it's 107, it's greater than 50, 65, 95, but then 28 and 26 don't make it. So let's see, right? Let's check that hypothesis. How about this one? Let's see. This one is, it says map, right? And so this map, if you remember, what does map do? It creates a new array, and the values of that new array contain whatever this function returns. And so let's see what this function returns. So this returns what? Returns whatever that predicate returns. It returns either true or false. So at the end of this map, what you're going to end up is with an array of just true, false, true, false, true, true, false, true, right? All just arrays. Basically, going to end up with false, true, false, true, true. That's what you end up. And then you're going to filter on that. Okay, so this makes no sense, right? You're going to end up with an array of the same size when you really want to end up with an array a smaller size. So that actually gives you a clue. I'm saying, the order of this matters, right? I probably would have to filter first. So remember, filter comes back with a smaller array than what you started with, right? So EWQ has 5 elements. And then if you filter on this, you're only going to return the array whose elements, right, make this true. So at the end of this, you're going to end up with an array that contains only 3 elements, right? The ones that are greater than 50. Okay, so that's promising. This is promising. At the end of that, I have an array of 107, 65, and 95. Then I map those to render the LIs, which have the values instead of an UL. So this looks right. This one definitely looks right. How about this one? So this one looks that it's using the same filter, but instead of using the arrow syntax, right, it's using the function syntax, right? I just want to check to see if syntactically this makes sense. So I'm iterating over this. I'm getting each DSA, checking to see if it's greater than 50. So this returns true or false. So this looks like it's exactly the same as this. It's just that it's using the function syntax as opposed to the arrow syntax. Okay, so that looks promising. So that looks right. That looks like it's grabbing those 3 elements instead of 5. And then map, also same thing. It's using the function syntax as opposed to the arrow syntax, right? And it's returning LI. So these 2 they're promising. These 2 look like they're equivalent, but definitely not this one. But this last one. So this last one, look, it's doing the same thing as before, right? This is definitely rendering the LIs, but it's returning all the LIs, right? It's not filtering them. Okay, so this comes back with just a whole bunch of LIs. How many? 5 LIs, 1 for all of them, right? I haven't filtered anything. And then I want to pass that through comparing all those LIs. Here, I'm comparing the LIs with an integer. That makes no sense. I can't compare, JSON, HTML compared with numbers, right? So that definitely is no good. So the answer was these 2. Okay. So here you have an input field and says, okay, well, consider the input field. You click on the label, and then the input field receives focus, meaning you can start typing there, right? So which of the following implements that, right? And so I give you some bogus versions of this where the names are the same. That doesn't work, right? This is where the IDs are the same. That makes no sense. You can't have 2 elements with the same ID. You have here a 4 where the 4 matches the name, right? That almost looks like it's correct, but it's not. right, is the one where the 4 matches the ID, not the name. Right, so all these 3 were wrong, and so this one is right. So this is, you have a couple of check boxes. If a user clicks on the text, you click on the text, then the button is selected. Which of the following implements that? So remember, so this is again, being able to use labels, right, to cause either focus or something to be selected. And there's a couple of ways of doing that. You could wrap the input field, right? You can wrap the input field with the values, and then that controls whether the input field gets checked. So that looks promising. This was using the presumably this label, right? Because the names are the same, then that would work. But no, we know that, right? That doesn't work. Here, same thing is trying to fool you into thinking if the IDs are the same, maybe they work together. It's not. It's the 4 has to match the ID. So these two answers are correct. Here's a couple of hints on whether you get this kind of grayed out that initially it's empty and you can see that. Never mind this image there. It means that it's too small to see, but I don't think it's too small to see. You can see that, right? It shows it's grayed out, Thomas Sowell. But then when you start typing, it goes away, right? And then, but if you remove, then it shows again, right? So that's, the behavior that it's a placeholder, right? Not value, not hint, not tip, right? It's a placeholder. Okay. What about if you hover over it and you get this like little, grayed out, and so, yeah, we know that, right? That's the use of the title, not the tooltip. There's no such thing as a tooltip, not the placeholder. That's what's the grayed out in the back, right? Not the hint, but it's the title. Okay. How about initializing the value, right? How do you initialize an initial value? Notice that it's not grayed out, right? The actual value of the field is initially Thomas Sowell, right? So it's not data. It's not the input value. It's not the placeholder, but it's the value. Value sets the initial value of an input field. Okay. Same thing with text boxes. Let's play around with text boxes. Some examples with some colors in the CSS, right? Background color, foreground color. Hyperlinks when you click and then you read the output and then come back with the results. That if you click on a hyperlink, right, it navigates to some, it displays different things. Okay. All right, there you go. So that's that is a midterm example for 2021. Any questions? Mr. Winnie? You have any other question? How many questions? I think about maybe like 30 questions, 25, 30 questions. And you'll have about an hour and a half to answer them. So again, I'll be here on Wednesday, and for all of you to, if you have any questions, we can ask during that exam. I'll answer them, and then throughout the rest of the week, if you want to take some more time to do it on your own, that's fine. But I won't be as available, excuse me, to answer questions. So the benefit of coming on Wednesday is that you'll have me here. If you don't understand something, I'll be able to answer right away. Whereas, throughout the rest of the week, you'll kind of be on your own. You know, I'll try to be online, you know, as much as possible and answer as much as possible. But you know, I might be in a meeting, and I won't be able maybe to answer right away. Well, all right, everyone. If you have questions, then good luck. You know, hope this this helps. All right, and the extra week on finishing up the Redux. I hope that helps as well. All right. All right. Good luck, everyone. Thank you.